Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today, guys. This is the Aspen City Council work session for May 15th, 2023. We have two items on our agenda. The first one is interviews for boards and commissions. That's probably going to take us 45 minutes to an hour, I imagine. So if you were here for our second item, which is the Newcastle Creek Bridge community discussion, you got a little bit of time to wait. You're welcome to step outside where it's gorgeous out and come on back in. Anyway, we'll get started with our agenda, and that means we're going to start board and commission interviews. The first one I have here is animal shelter. We had Adam Goldsmith could not make our last meeting, so he's been rescheduled for today, and he's here. Come on up. Hi.
Hi.
Let's see, you served on the animal shelter board for too many years to count, I think.
Way too many.
And you're interested in continuing to do so. We had a couple of applicants as well that were applying for the position and stuff. I don't need to
wrestle for it or
Yeah,
whatever.
something. You obviously are aware of the roles and responsibilities and meeting times and how you guys handle business. So I guess I would just say thanks for being here. Thanks for all the years that you put into this. So I don't have any questions.
No, I've been on. There's Seth has the shelter. He has his business there. He has there's the nonprofit that I'm on the board of, and then there's this public.
Thank you for that.
Thing, just so if you understand what's going on. So I'm on the nonprofit board,
Right.
And have been for a long time. And then years ago, this was formed, or I joined this, and this committee or group doesn't do that much. It meets once a year. Seth asked me if I would continue, and I'm happy to do so because I'm so involved to begin with because of the nonprofit. So that's the short.
Thank you for that clarity. Members of council, does anybody have any questions or condolences or anything of the like?
Go ahead.
John?
Dog or cat?
A dog. No, both, be fair, but I'm a dog guy.
Bill?
Thanks for your service on the board, Adam. Nice to meet you. I asked basically the same question to the other applicants. What do you think the animal shelter is doing well? What do you think it could do better? What do you think could be accomplished in your service on that board?
It's a great question. I think the good news is that this board doesn't do much because it doesn't need to, this particular public version. Seth, for as long as I've lived here over 25 years, has been just doing such a good job, actually a great job at what he does, providing a community service, both with his business of boarding people's animals when they travel, which a lot of people here obviously do, and also finding homes for not only the homeless animals of Pitkin County, but we're the only shelter probably in the world that is fortunate enough that we don't have much of a problem here. We bring in animals from other places, Seth does, and it all works exceedingly well. He just does and it's his life. He breathes it, lives it, eats it, and so I don't see any real improvements that could be made. I'm happy to say, and I'm the first, if there were any, I'd tell you. But it runs really smoothly. Seth works really hard, and it all, I don't have a bad word to say, it all works really, really well out there.
Thanks.
Is it true that Seth eats out of a bowl?
Seth does a great job. And even he's trying to find a little life-work balance because he's got 2 kids now, but he's struggling with it. He works a lot. So, and things are really good there.
No, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you all.
Thanks. Appreciate you. The next one, we're going to go to another board, the next gen.
No, they're both off.
Check.
Better? Too much? Could be too much. Next gen, we have Bailey Everhart here in person. Come on up to the desk, if you will.
Hello.
This is the same, Bailey was scheduled for last time, but had some other things going on, couldn't make it, so thank you for being here tonight. We've spoken a little bit about this, and I've talked to you a little bit about Next Gen, so thank you so much for showing up and applying for this position. I'm going to open it up to other councilmen right away.
I'll go for it. Hey Bailey, thanks for applying for this board. Is there something particular you hope to accomplish on this board, or is it just a passion?
You know, I just want to be involved with our community. I sit on the Leadership Development Board for the Buddy Program. I coach volleyball for the high school. I coach a traveling team out of Glenwood. So I'm very involved in the community and the children's sense of things. So I want to kind of get more involved with people around my age and just kind of being a liaison between, you know, someone like us and the board and city council.
Makes sense, thank you.
Thanks. John?
Well, what do you foresee the Next Gen Board doing for the next couple of years?
You know, I've kind of spoken to Tori about what the next gen is and, you know, meeting with people in the community, see what it is that, you know, our city needs. And I think more or less what I focus on is the housing and retaining people who are working in the community, who are actually establishing life here rather than the people who are here for, you know, 6 months to a year. And how can we keep them and how can we, you know, have an interest in those people rather than the, you know, ski instructors who come for 6 months of the year or the people who work in restaurants during the winter and things like that.
Thanks.
Bill, any questions?
No, thanks for applying, Bailey. Good job getting involved. No, it's not easy. I don't know the full history of Next Gen, but I know the recent history is that the board has had a challenge sort of determining what it wants to do and what it hopes to accomplish. I certainly value the perspective of what the board could bring to the table, but I'm not sure this is so much a question, but I'd encourage you to think about what you could define as a clear mission for the board so that we could support you, we could interact with you, and we could potentially allocate staff resources to further that.
Yep, I agree.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I do have one. Have you ever attended a Next Gen meeting?
No,
Okay.
I have not.
And this is out from Centerfield. Are you Bradley Everhart's?
I am,
Okay.
yes.
How's he doing? I haven't seen him in
He's
ages.
great.
Great.
good.
Give him my regards.
I will.
Thanks. Thanks, Bailey.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch soon. Appreciate it. The next one we have is APSHA. We have Peter Grenny. Hey, Peter.
Hi.
Peter, thank you so much for applying to the APSHA board. As I start off most interviews, you know when they meet, you understand the roles and responsibilities of APSHA board members.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I think this is an alternate position.
Yes.
Other council members, questions for Peter at this time?
Yeah. Hey Peter, thanks for applying for this board. What do you hope to accomplish on the APSHA board? What's your greatest passion towards this position?
I think it's really getting involved. For a lot of years, I've done research around housing and kept up with what's going on in housing, and I've never really participated on a board level, so this is sort of an opportunity to really participate and get involved.
Any specific sort of like motions that you hope to make while on the APSHA board potentially, or? Just
No,
vague right now.
I think in this interview process and with the Board of County Commissioners and reading through the most recent agendas and watching the meetings, I realize there's a lot that I don't know, so I look forward to kind of diving in and being at the table to contribute how I can.
That's totally fair, thank you.
Bill?
Thanks, Peter. Good to see you. Thanks for applying. Peter, you are and were involved in Aspen Deserves Better, which has been talked about at this table. Some people perceive you to be a critic of APSHA and the housing programs. I know you to be one of the most informed people about APSHA and their policies in our community. I don't find you personally to be a critic. Could you explain to us why you care about APSHA and how it functions, and if you care about APSHA and how it functions?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. I think first to answer your question, why I care, I really genuinely believe that the long-term sustainability of our community, the health and vibrancy is directly tied to the success of APSHA. And I think that's where it all starts. If people are happy and secure in their housing, they're gonna feel like stakeholders in the community, which is gonna lead to connectedness and a more healthy community overall. So I think, you know, everything starts in our community at APSHA. It's our greatest resource, both because it's our biggest asset physically and also because of the people, over 6,000 residents in APSHA. That's a huge part of our population in Pitkin County. So I think that's why I care. I have a lot of friends, most of my friends live in APSHA or lived in APSHA. And I feel like this is a way that, I think APSHA is a way to really improve the system for the current residents and future generations. And just to address Aspen Deserves Better, I know there's been questions about that, and my involvement really came from a point of wanting to help combat some apathy in the community and help create more awareness and education around some of the local issues. And that really evolved into trying to promote voter turnout. And voter turnout in the last March election went from 38 to 46%, so there was some improvement. And I hope to think that Aspen Deserves Better had a small role in that. So I understand the concerns that as part of Aspen Deserves Better, in engaging people on local issues, our concept or plan was to be a resource for community issues, mostly through reposting local news articles and source documents. And I realize that some people might have felt that that wasn't always unbiased, which is a hard thing to do, but that was always the intent.
Thanks. Do you think retirees should be kicked out of their housing?
I do not.
Okay. Do you think that every owner and tenant in APSHA housing should have every document examined and all of their private information shared publicly?
I do not.
Thank you. I'm done.
Thanks.
Ward?
Hey, Peter.
Hi.
It's hard to see with the backlighting.
Oh,
I see mostly a black blob.
maybe a better view.
I know you and I have discussed this at length. I'm curious what your position is on prioritizing APSHA housing by job positions.
Well, I guess I learned from watching a recent council session that there already is prioritization in some of the policies around housing, and there's various degrees of prioritization already in APSHA. And I think our conversations surrounding this in the past have really come from a place of wanting to house essential workers and people vital to the community as we continue to hear stories of people that are displaced because they can't find housing. And so I think it's a conversation to be had, and prioritization is a pretty heavy loaded term, so I'm careful not to say whether or not I agree with prioritization or not.
I thought that was your position when we spoke. What do you think of the recently enacted right-sizing pilot program at APSHA?
I think it's great. I think at the strategic plan meeting last week, it was great to hear the questions about scalability of it and if it can go beyond 5 matches and how that can be facilitated a little bit more. Right now, it sounds like you've got to find a match between 2 property owners. So if it's a success, I really hope it's scaled, and I think it's a great step.
Yeah, I think that there could be some more APSHA involvement in getting people together. I think it's a start, but I think we have some improvement that we can do on it. I had another question, but it escaped me. If I come up with it, I'll let you know. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter and I had an opportunity to speak today, and I actually got a chance to talk to him a little bit about my questions, but I still have outstanding questions around Peter's interest in employment requirements, prioritization by job type, but also around what he may think the role of APSHA should be in development or guiding or limiting development of affordable housing. Aspen deserves better, and your role there also leads me to question some of your motives around housing, and also just the manner in which you operated over the last little while. But I do appreciate that we got a chance to talk today, and I look forward to meeting with you. I believe we're going to try for next Wednesday. So I think that's a great start for us to kind of get a conversation going on around housing that's more constructive than it's been in the last little while. So thank you so much for applying. We appreciate it, and we will let you know very soon.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Next up is Board of Adjustment. We have Tim Sack, another member that could not make our other scheduled interviews, but I think Tim is online now.
I'm here, yeah.
Thanks, Tim. I hope you're doing well, and thanks for making time for us wherever you are. You are applying for Board of Adjustment, and you are aware of the role and responsibilities for Board of Adjustment members.
Yes, I am. I've been on the board since its inception.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to other members of council for questions for Tim. I'll start this way. John?
No questions. I'm happy that he's served before and glad that he's reapplying.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, John.
Bill?
No questions on my end. Thanks. Excited for.
Thanks, Bill.
Reapply.
No questions either. Huge fan of Tim.
Great.
Just curious about Crown espionage. Interesting email address.
I'm a special agent, just trying to infiltrate our local government here. It's all work. Don't worry about it. That was my first email when I signed up for Gmail about 15 years ago, and just haven't got around to changing it. My business was Crown at the time, and I don't know why I just like espionage.
Thanks. You didn't actually have to answer that in full, but thank you. Thanks, Ward. Tim, thank you so much for reapplying for this position. We will let you know very soon. And thanks for making time today to be able to talk with us.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
All righty.
Bye.
Historic Preservation Commission is next, and we have Kim Raymond. And she is online as well. Kim, are you there? You're not coming through right now. I see you unmuted. Oh, you're having a computer moment. You may need to log out and log back in just to get a reset, Kim, and then we will come back to you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, we can.
Is there a way for them to raise
Hold
their
on one
volume?
second. Kim, say something again, please. Kim, you still there? That was weird.
She ghosted us.
Kim, one more try. All right, why don't you try what I said? Try logging out and log back in. All right, we'll come back to her when she gets back in. We will move to planning and zoning. We have a few persons in room and online. Ken Canfield, Eric Knight, Marcus Blue. If you guys are here in person, come on up to the table. Make sure that the lights at the base of those microphones is green. And we also have Maza. Marianne is online as well.
She filled out her application with us 2 interviews ago for P&Z. And I told her that we were still interviewing and looking for her, so if she was still interested, that she should come back with us. All right, Maza, are you there? Are you able to, yes.
Hey, Tori, yes, hi,
Thank you.
welcome, everybody. Yep, I'm here, let me know when you need me, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for being here and applying. As I always say, our citizen boards and our volunteers are so important to the way business gets done, especially in this, land use and the like. Planning and zoning takes care of a lot of heavy lifting for us, and subsequently also has a pretty ambitious meeting schedule. Are you three in front of me and Maza online, are you all aware of the meeting schedule and the role and responsibilities for planning and zoning members?
Yes.
Maza
Yes,
as well?
Tori. Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and look around and open this up for some other questions from council members. So, Bill, do you want to start us off?
Happy to. Thanks, gentlemen, for applying. Planning and zoning is probably the biggest time commitment of all the boards, so hope you're aware of that and what you're getting into. But I'll ask you all the same question. Could you talk about a particular element of our land use code in Aspen that you're interested in, that you're concerned with, that you think functions well or doesn't function well, and maybe elaborate on it to the extent that you can?
Whoops. It's interesting. I was reading through the Aspen Area Community Plan that was set forth in 2012, and I found it fascinating of how all of the concerns that were written out then are pretty much identical to what we have now, of either the fears of the direction that development was going or what have you, and pertaining to that entire plan, it was concerning to me too, as having grown up, coming out here since I was 3, Powder Panda, Buttermilk, and living here full term, for the past 13 years, I would love to see, the preservation of Aspen done in the best possible way. And I think that we need to have more young people, next generation being involved. There's been so many people who have put forth their time, and I've got a lot of respect for everybody who puts forth themselves for being in office. It takes a lot to do that. But to get back to your question, I want to be a part of the bigger discussion of how to make those things happen in terms of executing whether it's the community plan or the idea of Aspen, because it seems as though we've had discussions, but the fears continue to perpetuate, and we kick the can down the road. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but just in regards to that plan, it's like I'm reading an article of how we feel today, but it was written 11 years ago.
Thanks.
It sounds like Marcus and I are applying for the same reason. Aspen clearly has changed in all kinds of ways, and it is not functioning for locals as well as it used to. And I know that the role of P&Z is not to decide these matters. We help and certainly take guidance from the council. But it seems to me that and I'm digressing a little bit, but P&Z has 2 roles. One is a judicial role. And I think that can be, it's handled pretty well now. I think it could get a little bit better and make sure that people who go through that process are pleased, feel they've been treated fairly, and their concerns have been heard. The broader policy issues are the ones that they excite me, but they're no more important in many ways than the other issues, the judicial issues that come before P&Z. The judge I worked for after I graduated from law school told me that I mentioned that we had a big case coming up, and he said, they're all big to the people involved. And that's the attitude I would bring to P&Z. On the broader big policy issues, I think Marcus and I are certainly in agreement that it would be nice to see if we can bend the curve a little bit. And I think it can be done with some really creative work. I look forward to the possibility of working with you all and with the community development staff to come up with some creative ideas, perhaps some ideas that folks haven't really talked a lot about, but maybe legal, they may be not. Obviously, you don't do anything that's not illegal, but I think we're to the point where being a little bit more aggressive about these issues would be appropriate.
And you're Ken.
I'm Ken.
And then my position, I feel like these guys that we're at kind of a critical juncture and looking around town and seeing the number of stalled projects, reading that, if there's not a quorum in these meetings, it's kind of stuck and can't continue, and feeling like, it's time to lend a hand to step in. And being around in town for a long time, have seen it change, and I think it'd be a huge honor and opportunity to help guide into the future, in reference to like the Aspen Area Community Plan and lending assistance to each and every meeting.
Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. And then I want to give Mazza a chance as well. Mazza, did you hear the original question?
I did, yeah, Tori, thank you so much. And I don't think you guys can see me, but yeah, and I appreciate everybody's time, that is here today to be on these committees. And I do, I can certainly echo a couple things, that were previously mentioned. For me, I know you kind of asked what are like the main drivers and such. And I think, there's, after kind of revisiting the whole community plan, again, there's a lot of key factors that I think really do need some adjustments, but I also, I know I've been on some of the meetings before, and maybe even just the amount of time, kind of spent like with what are the topics of, of choice of what's being discussed at each individual meeting. I think, looking back at the plan and then looking at the agendas on the current meeting schedules, the times that I've been there, it seems like there's a lot of missteps. Things are not even actually brought up on a regular, consistent basis enough to even give, thought, time, and dimension to even allowing any of that to have any, talking points or creative, I guess, thought processes towards essentially making any shifts. So, I'm definitely a proponent of the environment, but I also feel, quite strongly that I think it's important, considering that this is the plan and has been the plan, but there's heritage, there's, environment, there's housing, there's, daycare, there's a lot of things on here that I actually think don't rarely actually get, touched upon in those meetings. So I kind of want to revisit, hey, let's revert back to what the original plan was, what's working, what's not working, and how can we really, take advantage of moving forward in a positive trajectory and kind of touching upon all the points at hand. I don't think it's one point of interest. I think there's a multitude of, things that need to be kind of talked about. So that's my stance.
Thank you, Mazza. Bill, any other?
No, that was it. Thanks so much, Mazza.
Okay. I'll look down this end. Sam?
Yeah, this is like a vague question, but being on P&Z, I was there for 2 years, and city staff will give you a recommendation on every packet, and I was just curious, I feel like the answer is going to be it depends, but do you feel like you'll take city staff's recommendation with a grain of salt and just try to be as unbiased as possible towards every application, or do you feel like you'd probably follow city staff's recommendation more than not, just because they said it?
Start in reverse. I'm going to start with Mazza.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the question. So to your point, you know, I do feel that, again, just to kind of reverberate and reiterate what I kind of just spoke about, you know, there are some things that maybe haven't been even brought up as of, you know, most recent, considering, you know, the overall plan. So I think it does, you know, I would be obviously able to kind of sit and listen and try and ask critical questions, you know, such as an attorney or a judge would do in a court of law, and, you know, just kind of get everybody talking inquisitively and also being, you know, kind and compassionate to, you know, the other group. You know, my background's heavily in sports, and so, you know, being a coach or a player, you know, it's important that we all cohesively work together, you know, and if things, you know, get sent along, like, of course, we're not making those final decisions, but, you know, I think the last meeting I was attending, you know, with the other council, you know, the P&Z people that were there, they asked, you know, do you guys have any topics? Do you have any discussions for us? And, you know, it just seemed like, you know, people just kind of were trying to run out the door instead of actually put their time and effort into maybe what does need to, you know, be heard or said. And so, you know, I'd be happy to kind of advocate, you know, for what the group comes to as an agreement and voice those opinions towards, you know, you guys, and to be able to make the best choices overall.
Thanks, Mazza. We'll go back the other way.
I think each individual situation had, you know, its own decision making behind it. I don't think there'd be a blanket like they say it's good, it's probably good, just go with it. But as a resource to asking questions and understanding it better.
Jen?
Your question reminds me of when I was back in school. One of my favorite courses was a public policy course where the professor would give us staff recommendations that had been made. One that particularly comes to mind is the governors of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey had to make a major decision about the Delaware River. And it involved a lot of money. And it turned out it was a mess. The three states spent fortune and didn't improve the quality of the river at all. And what the professor showed is that if you took the staff recommendations, all you had to do is look at certain graphs that contain their data. Just go to the data itself. And if you looked at the data and asked a couple fundamental questions, it became clear it would never work. And so I think that when you approach a recommendation that's made by staff, you obviously have to look at it as coming from a bunch of experts who know what they're talking about, but they can make mistakes just like everybody else. And I think it's really important to listen to the applicant, and if there are disagreeing points of views, and maybe just your own point of view may disagree with what staff says. So that's the way I would approach it. I couldn't tell you obviously what a particular decision would be.
Can't really add too much more than what everybody else has already said. I mean, I think if you're on the board, you owe it to the situation to ask the questions, to dig in, and then for each person to bring their own experiences and thoughts to the process in order to actually get a cohesive dialogue going.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I noticed on all your applications, I was pleased to see that when you were each asked about your philosophy on the Aspen area community plan, you each gave answers that I appreciated, especially Mr. Knight. I really enjoyed your response. A two-part question to each of you. Number one, do you think the Aspen area community plan in its current form is adequate, or do you think it needs to be updated? And the second part of the question is, what part of the AACP do you think is lacking in addressing our community needs?
Ken, I'm going to start with you.
I have read the Aspen Area Community Plan, and I think there's an awful lot in there that is, it seems like it's aspirational, and we just haven't been able to achieve what the plan has set out. The particular concern I have is the way in which development in the core is taking place, and in particular the lack of diversity of retail establishments, the dearth of restaurants, the fact that locals don't seem to be in the same sort of positions that they have been in the past, and to the extent that that can be looked at through policy changes, either as part of an Aspen Area Community Plan rewrite or through some innovative policies that council might adopt, I'm not sure about. But it seems to me that's really what needs to be, from my personal perspective, needs to be addressed. I understand that there are all kinds of other problems that face the community, but certainly that is a significant one.
Thanks.
Maza?
Hi, Tori. Yes. Okay. Thank you for the question, John. Yeah, so I do feel like the plan could, use an update. I mean, it's now obviously over 11 years old. First of all, I think that some of the core elements going on in the plan, are great, and they are well, oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry.
we got
Well
you.
well intentioned. And then, there was the one piece that kind of really sticks out to me, which I'm not really sure that it actually is honestly the current trend of where, town is going. Obviously, it was, a very historical town, for many years, and one of the first on, especially the western slope of the state of Colorado. But there's a whole element and layer about, quirkiness and creativity. And, I know when I moved to town, initially about 8 years back, there were a lot of elements of things of that nature. And I think now, things have kind of certainly tidied up, cleaned up. And I don't know if that's technically even something that, town and everybody in the town can see to continue to be something that maybe should even be in those guidelines moving forwards, because I just, I don't know what quirkiness is left except for, some of the events and things going on. But when it comes to structure and, buildings and things like that, it seems that everything wants to be modern, clean, more up to date, and I guess efficient and energy efficient, of course, as well. So, maybe instead of that, maybe there needs to be more of an emphasis more on, environmental efficiency as well, in further depth in there. So that's my stand. Thank you.
Thanks, Maza. Marcus, and then Eric.
Yes, I think the plan should be updated. I mean, it's been over a decade, but one of the things that I had written is that, it is, as he was saying, aspirational, and it was considered a guiding document. And I feel like it could use, if we're actually going to take the time to rewrite it, implement it, to have more teeth to it, to where something that's going to actually truly help guide and move things forward, as opposed to, yes, these are great ideas that we all talk about and that we can agree upon, that we want Aspen to be X, but in what way is that actually going to occur outside of having, an aspirational document? I agree about the core changing a lot. I think all of us could probably agree we'd love to see more ma and pa shops around town, and it's sad to see the ones that have gone away. I don't know if there's, ways for building owners to have tax incentives in order to be able to, say, have a local store owner as opposed to, a national or international chain occupying a space. But I think there needs to be something, moving in that direction in order to try to keep our character and to keep everything that we've loved about it and why we're all here and why y'all serve on council the way you do. And so we all have a passion for this place and want to hold on to it. And so that's why I'm here today, and that's why they're here. It's because we all just want to, continue that in our own way. But that's, I guess that's what I would say my main concerns are.
Thank you.
Eric?
Well, I feel like it's intended to kind of be a evolving document, and, I definitely think it should be assessed, because in some areas it's killing it, it's doing great in open space and trails and parks. I think we're doing an outstanding job, and then areas like these guys mentioned, like keeping the vitality of town and employee housing and keeping this, community that people can enter and can afford to enter and join the community, are at critical stages right now, and could probably use some more work on it.
Thanks, Eric. Anything else, John?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Ward, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I have several here. First one's one word. Aspen Area Community Plan, is it aspirational or a guiding document?
Sorry, I lost track of my, you got me on that. Okay, I'm gonna start actually with Eric.
One word.
Both?
Marcus?
Both.
Ken?
Both.
And Mazza?
Yeah, it's both. Thank you.
What? Both.
Both?
They tricked you.
All right. I hear a recurring theme amongst all of you that you think things need to change, that we've lost sight of what the goals of the Aspen Area Community Plan are. So I'm asking you, what needs to be changed in Title 26 that can make Aspen have more messy vitality? What do you think can be changed, and how can you do that as a member of P&Z?
Which might be a big question to answer right here. So I can't wait to hear the answers, but we're gonna go in the same order. So Eric, we'll start with you.
What can be changed is, like I said, I think maybe reviewing the plan and what's working and what's not, and prioritizing what needs the most work and what critically needs to be addressed now, and prioritizing in that matter, I think.
Just to clarify, I'm talking about Title 26.
Which is the land use code.
The land use code.
Which, once again, I just gotta jump in. It'd be tough. I'm looking at Philip in the back corner. He might be one of the few people in this room that could actually come up with Title 26 changes that can create or enhance vitality? Is that messy vitality?
We have messy vitality, and I think that economic conditions have changed that balance. And one of the roles of P&Z members is to recommend policy changes. So this is the gist of my question. What do you feel you can do to recommend or affect changes as a member of P&Z?
I really have to look at more of Title 26 to address it, but I agree, bringing business into town, whether that's help through like tax incentives or through the city acquiring properties and renting them out to businesses that serve the locals, to afford locals. Maybe those would be some ways off the top, but it's hard to answer without knowing detail of Title 26.
Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, basically piggybacking on that as far as local things are concerned. Obviously, the economic aspect of it, pandemic was basically gas on a fire around here for the changes that we've seen, and then all of a sudden it was like overnight, you know, real estate prices, everything skyrocketed because everybody wanted to come to the outdoor area, and it's changed dramatically, in my opinion, from people who have moved out here, lived out here because of what they really, really love about this place, as opposed to getting out of the metropolitan area for the reasons that we had 3 years ago. But that being said, I do think there's opportunity to try, especially when it comes to the core of changing the way it works for locals trying to start a business who probably have it the hardest of anybody. It's a lot of time, energy, sweat, sacrifice, and money put into something that's not guaranteed to last, where you can have a international chain come in, dump a lot of money and write it off. And meanwhile, it pushes all the longtime locals further and further out of town and further down valley or out of state. And so I personally have hated seeing that and want to try to come up with some creative ways to try to right the ship in that regard.
And then I'll go to Mazza.
Perfect. Thanks, Tori. So I think, we kind of have to revert back to, what are the strong elements of the economy in the first place in our town? And, in my opinion, I think that it's heavily, tourist-based. I think that additionally, that leads into a couple of areas, obviously my background is, on the real estate side of things. And so, I think ensuring that what our plans and protocols and laws and rules and regulations are, especially when it comes to even short-term rentals to long-term rentals to, all the areas like Airbnb, VRBO, I think maybe kind of getting our own, we don't run our town like the rest of the world does on, many layers and levels or the rest of the country. And I think, what works sometimes in other places, you can look at Steamboat Springs, you can look at Vail and Eagle, you can, look at some other ski towns. But I think it's really important that, we make sure that there's a great symbiosis for not only, people coming to Aspen, but also for the people that live in Aspen. And so what is really driving, our economic, stability in this town? And, from my perspective, I think that, obviously there's also commercial real estate, like was touched upon earlier, which, is businesses and restaurants and things of that nature as well in the core and otherwise. But yeah, I think making sure that we are allowing everything to sort of work in a symbiosis relationship to one another, to the point where, we're not making, quick changes and things that might really truly negatively impact, what we need. We need construction so we can have renewal updates and things like that of hotels and, commercial spaces, as well as, people's, primary residences to their rental properties. And so I think really making sure that, whatever rules, laws, regulations we put in action, that they are going to positively, reverberate throughout the community's overall needs. And also in saying that, everybody that lives here locally, we love it. We thrive on the environment. We thrive on all these amazing elements. And, with the new ideas of maybe bringing in, bigger airplanes to the airport and that sort of thing, and revamping even that, then that leads into, some of the environmental issues as well, more jet fuel, more noise pollution, and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of keyed in on really staying centric, focused on the economy and how, does P&Z really play into all those layers, because there are many. So that's my stance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mazza. Anything else, Ward?
I didn't get a chance to answer the
Ken.
question.
That's right, Ken.
At the time that I applied for this position, I went and read Title 26 as it applied to the powers of P&Z. I'm not sure that P and Z has the power to make the kind of changes that you're talking about on its own. But to the extent that P and Z is in a position of either formally recommending or informally through discussions with council and with staff, it seems to me that there are a whole bunch of ideas that could be considered. And it's there are a number of different questions. One is, from a policy standpoint, is a particular change merited? Second, can you use Title 26, most likely the zoning provisions, to make changes that would implement the policies that people have agreed upon? And then third, is it all legal? So one question that comes to mind, for example, I personally, I don't know what other people would think, I personally would love to limit the number of out-of-state chains, restaurants and stores that can have business in the core. That's a policy that if other people support and it's merited, you then look, how do you use the zoning law to change that? And if you make the change in the zoning law, or you consider making the change, is it legal? So for example, under the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the Constitution, I don't know that you can do that. You might be able to, and if you're creative enough, maybe we can come up with some ways of doing it. But I think it's a fascinating question.
Yeah, we do have a formula retail ordinance, but I don't think it's ever been come into effect. Appreciate your answers on this, and I'm going to ask one more. P&Z, I think, is a really, really important board, and so I'm going to ask this question. When you're sitting on a board, you have Title 26, you have the application, and then you have the story, and every application comes with a story. And I'm asking if there's a really compelling story for an application, do you feel that you would be encouraged to bend the rules of the land use code to allow that application to go forward?
Marcus, I'm going to start with you.
I guess it kind of depends on what we're talking about. That's an easy thing to say, depends, but without having an actual example set forth, it's hard to say whatever that situation's going to be. But if we're running into legality, then there is no bending of the rules, in my opinion. Like, the idea is to stay above board morally and ethically. And so it's a slippery slope. If you start doing that, bending them here, then all of a sudden we can bend this one and bend that one there. And so I think the bigger thing is having the policy set in place so that there doesn't have to be a bending of the rules.
Ken?
The obvious answer is that your job as a commissioner is to apply the rules to a particular fact situation. You can't bend those rules because somebody makes a particularly compelling case. On the other hand, there's sometimes quite a bit of discretion in how rules get applied. And obviously I agree with Marcus, you can't prejudge any situation, but what you've just described is a judicial process. And I think as a country, we can't get away from it. As a commission, we couldn't get away from it. You're bound by the law.
Thank you. Eric?
Partially from reading and understanding, I mean, I think that's one of the obligations or duties or liberties of the planning and zoning, is that human element that can recommend, going against, say, an ordinance or a law like that. And again, not to blanket any good story you'd bend the rules for, but that's the point in my assumption of this commission is to give it the human element of weighing in, discussing it, and figuring out if it makes sense to make those kind of changes.
Thanks, Eric. Maza, last word on this one?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tori. So I don't believe in bending any rule. Values-wise, I really believe in, you know, working with the laws that are intact and in place, and, you know, being extremely knowledgeable about what those are. And, you know, I think, you know, it's always good to continuously be learning, growing, expanding. I think my favorite quote, you know, in the world is the only constant is that things are constantly changing. And so I think in terms of evolution, you know, as we're talking, you know, through a lot of points today from, you know, do we need to even revamp like the planning, you know, outlines and things like that. You know, one of my favorite things is this book is Law in America, and it just kind of goes into the premise of law in the first place and rules and regs, and you know how when you have more population or you have growth or you know shifts, you know you start with the law, and then thereupon another law is created when necessary, and so I would suppose and suggest that, you know, that's certainly not up to me to decide. However, you know, I would, you know, get myself up to date as much knowledge and, you know, premise of exactly the rules and exactly the breakdown of what the rule and the regulation outlines. Bring it to discussion, bring it to the meetings, you know, and then from there, then also, you know, I noticed this is one big point actually of mine that I did notice that it does seem that there is quite a disconnect, you know, the P&Z meet, and then, you know, your board meets, but I don't know, you know, I guess in terms, and there's so many boards that all actually bleed into one another's, I guess, needs of the overall town's trajectory. And I feel like maybe there needs to be almost more symbiosis amongst each board in connection, you know, with your specific roles as well, just to kind of get, you know, the broader, bigger picture, and so everything kind of make sure that it's not just, okay, this is one, you know, group and that's where they stand, but then the other group has no idea that maybe the same sort of argument, you know, exists in what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's, you know, with the animals' rights and that sort of thing in the town, or, you know, the airport kind of committee. Like, I think that there really does need to be maybe even more ongoing once a quarter or something like that, maybe group for everybody to somewhat even come together and then, you know, kind of find what works, what doesn't work, and what might need to be, you know, reassessed and done in the right way. Not just, I'm going to bend a rule or something like that, because to me that just doesn't feel ethically right. So that's my stance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mazza. Those are plenty of questions for you guys. I really appreciate it. I want to just take this opportunity to just say that, you know, we had to beat the drum at the city to get applicants. And Eric, as you said earlier, P&Z was actually at a standstill, couldn't get a quorum, couldn't move the issues forward, et cetera. So you guys have answered the bell, including you, Mazza, as well. I really appreciate you guys coming in, applying for this board. And I also really love all of your qualifications. You guys are all community members who are doing this because of their love for the community, not because of potential dollar that you can make off of it. So that really means a lot to me. I want to thank you guys very much. We will let you know very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mazza.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for making time today.
Tori, we could do this offline, or I don't know if it makes sense to do it here, but since myself and Sam have not been through these board nominating procedures before, could you explain a little bit about how the voting process works and what the next steps might be?
So
And
the
I don't know
next
if it
step,
makes
just
sense
like
to
it
do
was last time we met, I will send you an email that lists out what is needed in each one and who has applied for it and who we've interviewed. And we're complete now, that we don't have any outstanding interviews for this round. So I'll send that out to you. You guys can send me back, you know, any comments, support, any questions you might still have remaining. I'll then collate that and let you guys know, hey, this is where it is. Do you want to have further conversation about this, or can we move forward?
Okay, but is this a vote? Is it, if we decide this, you know, I say I would like X, Y, and Z persons for this board?
It's a vote. There would be 3 of us that would be necessary to support somebody moving forward.
Any given individual? Okay, great. Thanks.
We have one more to go. We're coming back to Kim Raymond if she's still with us. Yes, she is.
Oh, sorry, I forgot there was another interview.
Kim,
Hi,
are you there?
Sorry about yes, I am. Sorry about my technical difficulties.
No apology necessary. Kim is applying for HPC, and Kim knows HPC very well, I would say, but probably from the other side of the table. So Kim, you are aware of the roles, responsibilities, and the meeting requirements for HPC?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to the council members for questions of Kim. I'll start with Ward.
Hi, Kim, I wish you were here in person so I could say hi, but I'll say hi anyway.
Hi, Ward.
Do you have any current projects that may be coming before HPC?
I don't have any new ones. I have a few that we're still working on, that we'll be having some changes coming up for HBC. Obviously, I would not be even presenting them anymore if I were on the board, or having the opportunity to vote on.
Thank you,
But
Kim.
I don't have any brand new projects coming up right now.
Thank you. I always get a kick out of Kim Raymond and Raymond Kim. Raymond Kim did my knee.
Probably better than Kim Raymond doing your knee.
That's right.
Bill, can I go down to you? Any questions for Kim?
Sure. Thanks, Kim, for applying. Appreciate it. Hope you're well. Kim, could you tell us why historic preservation is important for Aspen?
I think because we have such a diverse and colorful history, and things have been changing so rapidly over the last 10 to 20 years. I think keeping our history alive and well is very important. As I think all of you know, I've been involved in a lot of historic preservation projects over the years, so I'm very well versed in the design guidelines and the goals of HPC. And I think as we go forward, a lot of the houses that were approved for remodels and changes years ago will be coming back around. And I think now there's a really great opportunity to try to bring these historic projects more into the modern era of energy efficiency, sustainability, and try to use these houses to help meet the Aspen City Council goals of a net zero. Sorry, I'm a little sleepy. I just have a long flight. Net zero emissions by 2030. And I think that would be a great place to start. A lot of these homes are in pretty good condition, but they could be so much better as far as energy efficiency goes.
Thanks. And what's your opinion on how the current menu of incentives, if you will, or the benefits of doing a historic project, how do you think that it helps achieve our goals of historic preservation in Aspen right now?
I think because when you do a historic project, it takes at least another year to get through the whole process. It's very expensive, and it's basically a labor of love for most people that go through it. And so I think giving them these incentives to do that is very important, or a lot of people just might not. Having the incentive of having, like you can, the FAR bonus, I think, is a small incentive, but incentives of having different things waived as far as criteria, I think that's a nice incentive. If they can be incentivized by getting their permits processed a little quicker, just because there's so many extra meetings and so much time tacked on to the permits, just to get through HBC before you can even start that process, that if they could have accelerated permitting processes or maybe get pushed forward in the line a little bit, I think that would be a great incentive for HBC projects.
Thanks very much, Kim. Appreciate your application.
Thanks, Bill.
John, any questions here?
No questions. I'm aware how qualified Kim is for this position and her long-time tenure here in the community. Thanks for applying, Kim.
Thank you, John.
I'll ask one. Thank you, Kim, for applying. I was wondering if you were familiar with the land use code changes during the moratorium that have affected HPC, and if you have an opinion on them.
Sam, off the top of my head, I don't recall
Okay.
how the moratorium changes affected HPC. But if I were elected to, or put on the board, I would definitely do my homework and get up to speed again.
Yeah, that's completely okay. I was just wondering if you're familiar, and yeah, it's definitely something I would recommend looking at if you're on HPC. Thank you so much.
I guess with that, Kim, I only have one question for you, and I think you bring a lot to this, this board if you're appointed. But along the same lines as Bill was just asking about the incentives, what do you think about the overall program? In a couple of specifics, these can be really short answers if you like, but have we been successful? Has our program been successful of historic preservation? And is our program mature? And are there changes we should be looking forward to in the future? And like I said, not real long answers, but just wondering about your take on our overall program.
Great question, Tori. I think because I've been involved with the HPC projects for so long, I've seen the progression of the maturity of the HPC. Originally, when I first got to town and started working, just the front wall of houses were being saved. And it's progressed to the point where we're truly saving the historic resources. And with Amy's guidance over all these years and with the different commission members over the years, there's been a lot of strides made in truly saving and renovating or restoring these buildings. I think there could be more work done in the energy efficiency and the sustainability aspect. That would be one thing I would like to try to encourage with these older buildings. But I think the overall success of the HPC is outstanding.
Thank you very much for that, Kim. Kim, we will let you know very soon, and we so appreciate you applying for Historic Preservation Commission spot. Thank you.
Thanks to all for your time and for letting me do this on a Zoom call. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Kim.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, that concludes our interviews for this evening. So if council members and everybody wants to just take a few-minute break, we're gonna get set up for our next topic. And we'll have those guys come on up to the table, but you guys can stretch your legs for a moment. Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. Just coming back after our board and commission interviews. This is the work session for May 15th, and we're on to our second agenda item, which is the Newcastle Creek Bridge entrance to Aspen discussion. So we'd like to introduce this item.
Well, I apologize for waiting for the PowerPoint to come up.
Yeah, hold on, it's just loading.
I can go ahead and introduce ourselves, though. Good afternoon, I'm Jen Uten. I'm the Senior Project Manager in the City Manager's Office. With me at the table is Project Manager Jack Dannyberg and Deputy City Engineer Pete Rice. Hopefully online we have Trish Aragon, the City Engineer. She's attending remotely as she's at the National Association of City Transportation Officials Conference. And in the audience is Senior Project Manager Mike Horvath. Also on our team is Transportation Programs Manager Lynn Rumbaugh. Sarah Ott and Diane Foster are also executive sponsors of this effort. And I would also like to note that there are several first responder representatives from Aspen Fire, the Sheriff's Office, and the Ambulance District here in the audience as well. And there is a letter from February in the packet regarding emergency egress capacity. And Assistant Chief Bill Lynn can be available to answer questions. And we're still waiting. I'll go ahead and just keep going. Hopefully we can work through the technical issues. I'd also like to thank our CDOT partners, Roland Wagner, Central Programs Engineer, and David Cesark, the Planning and Environmental Programs Engineer for Region 3 at CDOT. They've been valuable resources to our team, and Roland attended multiple events during the awareness phase of the project. Both are assisting with the RFP selection process. CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration have been helpful in answering questions and are supportive of our ongoing efforts. This ultimately is a CDOT facility, and we appreciate support from CDOT and FHWA as we have asked some technical questions. And with that, I might pause and just wait for us to get caught up.
Just in time.
Can you make me?
We're almost there.
Make sure your screen on your desktop is to one screen only and not extended. You did the whole thing.
There we go.
Success. So I'll come back to it. As a reminder, City Council directed staff to inform the community about the preferred alternative in order for the community to have a common understanding of the record of decision and the preferred alternative. We presented information from that 2-month-long effort to City Council in February. And included in that information, we talked about community questions that arose, those around construction costs, impacts to surrounding properties, and design details that will require additional studies and preliminary design work to answer. This evening's presentation will focus first on the background information about the reasons for this renewed conversation regarding the Newcastle Creek Bridge. answers to council questions from CDOT and FHWA, information on which council and community questions could be answered without going to 30% design schematics and which could not, the rough cost and timeframe if council wanted to explore a different one of those 43 alternatives that was considered in the 1997 evaluation process. In February, council also asked us to bring back options for prioritizing consultant work, and staff is seeking direction regarding phasing up the RFP this evening. Specifically, we're looking for direction regarding which specific studies that council might want to advance. Jack will later in the presentation identify which questions from the community are answered in which phase, and council can move forward specific aspects within the study to meet your objectives. And now I'll hand it over to Pete Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for giving us this opportunity for the discussion about the bridge. I'm going to step back a bit and talk about the why. Why are we bringing this up and why is this a hot topic? The first reason is the existing bridge conditions. In general, in our outreach this winter and fall, the general majority of the public understands that this bridge is aging. I don't think there's a lot of argument against the conditions of the bridge, but to bring it back to a little bit more visual, in 2018, we did a trail project on the bridge where we were going to fix the bridge deck when we took the asphalt off. Staff and CDOT were a little bit surprised when we noticed rebar had been touched on the milling of the asphalt. What that means is that rebar normally sits about halfway, well, it depends on the moment, but about 4 inches below the top of the concrete deck. That means that over the years, we've had to go in there, mill the asphalt down, and over 4 inches of concrete has been lost and we're down to the rebar. That means the moment isn't necessarily working like it should. That just brings back that that's one issue of several that we look at that are very complicated in this case. The next time that we have to go back in and replace asphalt, we're gonna have to get pretty creative with this so that we don't touch that rebar again. The other piece that was really interesting is there's a lot of gaps in the bridge that were empty. Concrete had fallen through, the rebar was torn down. The condition is real, and I think the community has realized this, but we just want to emphasize the bridge is at its final stages. Getting into the, go ahead, Jack.
It's just slow.
Just a little slower.
Getting into the bridge ratings and a little bit about this, we've presented you the bridge rating in the past as being 50.3. I'm going to kind of jump into the new ratings a little bit that's being done at a federal level, but the ratings essentially for CDOT now are 1 through 10. 0 for 4 is poor, 5 and 6 is fair, and then 7 and up is good. That's where you want to be, is that 7-8 range. And after the last CDOT rating, which happened last year, we found out that the superstructure was rated a 5, which is the girders and all the steel connections below. The bridge deck is at a 6, mostly because of the work we did in 2018. And the substructure is a 6 also. I think as we go forward and understand what this rating means, as you get into that 5-6 area, there's going to be a constant need of repairs on this bridge. That means that there's going to be a lot of interruptions, similar to the ones we saw last fall on the bridge joint. And it's really important to keep it at that 5. And 4 sets off a whole new system of complications for the, could be reducing loads. It could be going into repair pieces that could mean downtime to the economy and people. That's basically, we don't have time to do a whole plan and plan it out for April, May. So there's complications in doing that in the future. Okay, this next slide is going to show fire. We are fortunate in Aspen not to have been in the situation that the Lake Christine fire was before. As soon as this thing pops up, I walked about 6 blocks from my house during the Lake Christine fire to capture this picture. So the fire evacuation is real to me. Agencies representing the public safety have stated in a letter to council, the current approaches to utilizing the existing infrastructure is not adequate for excavation. It's important to know that some of the things that we've heard in the community about the Meralt Bridge design loading is only for one vehicle at a time. And the other one is the Rio. First of all, the Rio is not viable for vehicles in a safe manner to bring them out. But wow, the
empty place.
The other piece of Rio is it's one of the highest risk areas in the city as far as wildfire. There's probably a strong likelihood that the wildfire would come down on that side. So it's important to know, just as you're making these decisions, that the S-curves essentially handle about 1,000 cars an hour. Adding it, that's including Power Plant Road usually. You can get to about 1,050 an hour. In an emergency, the city is prepared to evacuate 35,000 vehicles. You can imagine the differences there in how you can do that in the city when you're limited by 1,000 vehicles in an hour.
I'm sharing, so if they can just switch the screen, I think it's up. You don't have any other type of PowerPoint.
This is why I have it on my notes and not on the computer.
That's why I'm analog. Yeah, let's just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's on the X drive. I can point it to you.
Snack time.
Who wants to talk bridge lifespan? Bridge lifespan, I'm gonna just move forward right now to keep for time's sake. It's important to understand the time frame for this bridge is nearing the.
There it is.
Okay, he's almost there. There's the great picture of fire.
It's just lagging. I don't. Like I'm sharing, it's going, responding.
Just keep waiting for it.
I'm the only one in the room that can see it.
AI in your computer?
What's that?
It'd be working if it.
What was that? An Ethernet connection?
Thanks, Mike.
Every time. It's
Thanks for nothing, Mike.
This isn't the screen that's being shared.
Let's just keep going.
Lifespan, 75-year lifespan for the bridge. Was done in 61. If you do the math, that means that we have 13 years to really do this. However, structural experts have told us that really we have 10 years of functional life on that bridge. That's really important to this conversation, that the bridge needs to be designed in any manner that the bridge that we currently have either needs massive repairs to get it back up to rehab in a temporary situation or greater. It's also important to notice that this bridge was never designed for the loading or the capacity that it currently has. 1961, they didn't foresee the amount of traffic and loading that we would need in this city.
I don't think anybody did.
Yeah. So now I'm going to jump, it's a great slide, project objectives. So it's important to know that the record of decision was done, we're back on fire.
All right, well, at least we moved to the fire.
Full screen at least.
Yeah, just keep going.
Okay. The preferred alternative and record of decision for the entrance to Aspen was evaluated based on the 10 community objectives that we've discussed in the past. Community-based planning led to this, these 10 community pieces. And that led in turn to looking at the vehicle trips and focusing on doing more environmental and transit-based project. So I think the city should be very proud in the fact that the 1993, 1994 vehicle trips were considerably lower than what was projected in 93 and 94. We're maintaining those levels, and that's really in response to a lot of the community with the transit pieces, the parking program, and people jumping on the buses. All that in combination has done a really great job that's very unique to Aspen. That was all derived from the record of decision. The other piece of that is the record of decision was really a community-based effort. Snowmass, county commissioners, and city council all approved the record of decision at the time through the community-based vote. One thing that's unique about the record of decision is it gives control of the process to the city of Aspen. This process led to, and we have a great sheet that shows the front page of the record of decision that states basically 2 lanes, 2 multi-purpose transit lanes, and 2 bus lanes. So a total of 4 traveled ways through between the roundabout and connecting into Main Street. There's a lot of pieces that are part of this in the FEIS, and it discusses that the bus lanes are temporarily until we get to light rail transit. But in general, council should expect 4 lanes of traffic, 2 are dedicated towards bus through this process. And one thing that I did want to notice that some of the pieces that were mentioned in the last council section is being broken off into a separate project that isn't necessarily infrastructure related. So during supplemental, we presented the short range transportation plan. The purpose of that plan is to look at parking and the transit modes that we have in a manner that looks at traffic demand management, and that means that carpools, that means that all your parking pieces, the prices, how we do permits, and all these other pieces of the downtowner. That is going to be the study where council can speak specifically. Those are all programmatic changes. The purpose of this project right here is infrastructure, and there are 2 different pieces. One is infrastructure programmatic. So we have broken that out so that transportation and parking program will have a separate work session to discuss those pieces with you. The preferred alternative, I'm just going to get into a few of the key pieces. The alignment, of course, goes from the roundabout, kind of curves around until it meets over Meralt and goes into Main Street. One of the great pieces of this, of course, is the land bridge. And the land bridge, this is really where a lot of community involvement gets involved on the programming between open spaces, the wildlife corridor, how bikes and pedestrians can actually cross between town without going across Main Street, which is honestly one of our bigger issues. And I think this provides a lot of opportunity for everybody. This will also help, this connection, the way that it's designed, will help a large piece of the problem in the West End and Cemetery Lane as far as traffic. This does help with traffic getting in and out of town a little bit more to where people are going to automatically choose to stay on Main Street. And that's my slides. Thank you for your time.
In February, Mayor Tory signed a letter with 18 questions for CDOT, and approximately a month later, we received responses from CDOT and FHWA. The letter was in your packet, and this presentation is intended to focus on a few highlights from it. The first of which is that CDOT noted that when the existing Castle Creek Bridge needs to be replaced, that the record of decision preferred alternative will be constructed. As Pete mentioned earlier in the presentation, the time left for the functional life of the existing bridge is pretty short. CDOT also answered several questions around different alignments or adjustments to the preferred alternative that could be made to account for the conditions today, which might be different than 25 years ago when the record of decision was finalized. Our team heard from the public during the awareness campaign regarding the preferred alternative's effect on the travel time for the hospital during an emergency from Cemetery Lane. So this question about keeping a section of roadway in place to connect to the roundabout was aimed at understanding what process would have to be followed if a modification to the preferred alternative were considered. And at a minimum, this would require reevaluation and possibly a whole new NEPA process. Next slide, very exciting, they worked. So, the National Environmental Policy Act requires an environmental impact statement if a proposed major federal action is determined to significantly affect the quality of the human environment. The response letter from March said this: a new EIS would be required if an alternative was not fully analyzed, resource impacts in the EIS. For example, the split shots resource impacts were not fully analyzed, meaning that if council were interested in pursuing this alignment, a new EIS process would need to be opened. So I'm going to reference a few bullets from the CDOT website regarding the environmental impact statement process. It requires scoping, which is a public process to help define the purpose and need for the proposed action or project to identify environmental issues that need to be studied. Data collection, development of alternatives, so identifying a wide range of highway, transit, and other types of alternatives, then narrowing these to the reasonable range of alternatives for detailed study, and it includes a no-action alternative. Analysis of the alternatives, preparation of a draft environmental impact statement, public and agency review of that draft environmental impact statement, preparation of the final environmental impact statement, and then the record of decision, which is what documents the decision and commits to mitigation of impacts by the lead federal agencies. So for some of you here who have been here since the 90s, that process will be familiar to you. The draft EIS evaluates the impacts of various action to resources and cultural features, and I won't go through the whole list, but it includes air quality, economics, parks, historic properties and wildlife refuges, pedestrians and bicycles, recreation, relocation, right-of-way, social, economic, and environmental impacts to low-income or minority populations. The analysis of direct impacts includes those associated with construction, and not only will the direct impacts of the proposed actions be studied, but also the cumulative and indirect impacts and effects.
Where are you reading from?
So I'm reading from, that was all from the CDOT website, and happy to bring it up here. Well, maybe happy to have Diane bring it up, but it wasn't on the slide, just kind of going through what is that process for, what is a full new NEPA process for an environmental impact statement entail. Part of the analysis that was performed to narrow their alternatives to the preferred alternative in the 90s was evaluation against the community's 10 objectives. And this was pretty unusual for a record of decision because while there's always public input as part of a record of decision, having 10 objectives included as part of the evaluation criteria to narrow the alternatives is unusual and gave the community a greater voice in the process of developing the record of decision. So one challenge of a new record of decision, a new EIS, would be that there could be changing objectives for the future process. And one important item to note is that Aspen is no longer a PM10 non-attainment area. City funding would be needed to pay for the process, and that's outlined in the CDOT letter. There could be limited control of that chosen alternative. As Pete mentioned, the existing bridge could need replacement or significant repairs before it's finished, and the city of Aspen could lose control over the process. And as I mentioned, the existing bridge will probably fall into the poor category, and the community will experience more frequently enclosures for maintenance and repairs on the aging bridge. Next slide. So in conversations with CDOT, staff confirmed that pursuit of the split shot would require opening a new EIS process. We don't know exactly how much that would cost. We anticipate that it could be 2 to 8 years and $2 to $8 million depending on the extent of the change. We would need to cooperate with Snowmass, Pitkin County, RAFTA, the EOTC, CDOT, and FHWA as we would develop those new objectives for a new process. Then again, it's possible that they wouldn't be repeated in a new process, and they could result in different impacts based on new environmental considerations. Noted in the CDOT letter is that the supplemental EIS and the new ROD for the US 160-550 connection in Durango took approximately 6 years, and the cost was approximately $2 million. In February, council requested that we bring back information regarding phasing possibilities for consultant work, and Jack's gonna walk you through that.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for your time this evening. When the city did our community awareness campaign, there were a lot of questions that we heard from the public and from council. Where are people going to, coming from, property impacts, traffic impacts? The goal of this investigative study is to answer the questions we received from the community and council. The scope of the work that's shown here was created directly from the questions that we received. The city has received proposals, staff has conducted interviews, and will start negotiations based on feedback that we received from you today. I will go over the scope of work in the next few slides. We're looking for buy-in from council and suggestions of changes that we can make to the work plan. In the February work session, staff heard concerns from council about proceeding too far along the preferred alternative design path. Based upon that feedback, the RFP was split into 2 phases that can be awarded separately. Phase 1 was created based on council feedback to answer background questions, current conditions, and analyze all 43 alternatives without furthering the preferred alternative too far. Thanks. Phase 1 focuses on assessing current traffic conditions and demands. There will be models created from the collected data to answer traffic questions about current conditions, future conditions, and emergency evacuation conditions. The questions that we will be able to answer through phase 1 include: where are drivers coming from, going to? How would the current conditions function in an emergency evacuation, and compare that to the preferred alternative? How would the preferred alternative impact traffic? Using available information, a low confidence property impact map will be created. This will be a step forward to addressing property impact questions, but keep in mind that these questions will remain until schematic drawings are produced. Preferred alternative cross-sections will be updated to help communicate potential impacts to the Merle open space. And like I said, more analysis will be done on the 43 alternatives that were not selected to better communicate to the public why they were not chosen. These alternatives include the split shot and reversible lane. The approximate cost of phase 1 is $1.2 million. Questions we cannot answer in this phase are questions related to project design, cost, specific property impacts, historic resource impacts, funding opportunities, construction timeline and phasing, and current bridge rehabilitation.
Cannot be addressed in phase 1.
Those cannot be addressed in phase 1.
What did you just say about property impacts?
So there's going to be a low confidence map that will be created from existing information to give us a low confidence understanding of what the property impacts will be, but specific property impacts with detailed precision won't be able to be available until phase 2 when schematic drawings are produced. Based on council feedback, city staff moved the reevaluation of the 43 alternatives, including the split shot and reversible lanes, into phase 1 of the RFP. This reevaluation will analyze the alternatives that were not selected for resource impact analysis in the record of decision. One of the alternatives that will be further analyzed in phase 1 is the split shot. This alternative splits traffic inbound and outbound into one-way roads between Cemetery Lane and 7th Street. This alternative has been studied multiple times in the city's past, including in 2008 when Parsons Transportation Group produced the study that was attached in your packet. Next slide. The bulk of the questions about the project from council and the community will get answered in phase 2. These questions include: what the possible cost and impacts would be to replacing the existing bridge, an analysis of rehabilitation of the Castle Creek Bridge, property impacts related to expanding the S-curves, property impacts related to the preferred alternative, the costs of the preferred alternative, construction phasing and impact questions, funding opportunity questions, specific trail and open space impacts, historic resource impacts, specific design questions. To answer a lot of the questions that are coming from the public and council, this phase needs to be initiated. Without phase 2, the city will not be able to apply for grants and can miss this generational opportunity for funding made available by the Inflation Reduction Act. Due to CDOT's financial situation, federal dollars are important to completing a project of this scale. The phase answers serious questions that the public has about the project, like impacts to historic resources, open space, and adjacent property. The approximate cost of phase 2 is $1.5 million. And with that, the main access to our community is coming to the end of its useful life. And as it gets older, the economic and safety impacts to constituents will worsen. We've heard from CDOT and their position on the preferred alternative implementation. Staff recommends awarding both phases to answer the questions from the community and continue the process of replacing our aging critical infrastructure. Staff will take feedback from this meeting into negotiations with the consultants. Work items can be added or eliminated from the scope of work based upon council feedback. Council can choose to pull items from phase 2 into the first phase to be awarded separately. An item that council might be interested in pulling forward is the analysis of the rehabilitation and replacement of the current bridge. And with that, what questions do you have for staff?
Thanks, Jack. Can you, on your slides, can you go back to the slide that shows phase 1? That one, yeah, that's great. Just leave that up for a second, if you will. I have a couple of questions, then I'll go to other council members and see what they have. But my immediate ones are, working backwards, you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you speak to me a little bit about why there is availability and what that availability really looks like? This project, I guess, is 10 years away from construction. So how would the IRA funds be able to be, and what's out there? What are we talking about? We're applying for what? Or do we know? Or
I think we would do an analysis of what grants are available. I mean, I'm very familiar with what it takes to kind of move through kind of eating the elephant one bite at a time. So it often requires that there is an initial grant that a community goes after that is either a planning grant or some other grant that sort of puts you in line, and then you can apply for other dollars. So what we would do is we would put together a funding strategy. And so I don't know if I have a precise answer. There are grants like the big raised grant that was previously called Tiger and was also called the Build Grant. So that is one that has been ongoing, and it is for large federalized projects.
But from discussion with consultants, we won't know, we won't be able to apply for these grants until phase 2 because we won't have schematic drawings to be able to apply for those grants.
Okay. So, I mean, we're talking about funds that would probably help in the planning and funds that might help in some of the answering some of the questions up front. But are we talking about there's a potential for $100 million from the Fed? You think that's going to be made available through the IRA?
I think based upon the CDOT letter, that the information that we're going to be pursuing in the interim before we go down the path of the preferred alternative is going to be the city's responsibility. Seeking funding from the Fed when we go to construction is really going to be made available and conceptualized in phase 2 of this RFP. And I mean, this is going to be an expensive project. The last time that the cost was estimated was in 2016, and it was estimated at $200 million. And so, yes, there's going to be significant funding required to be gathered from federal and state sources.
And then I was just wondering, in phase 1, there's some different traffic analysis and origin, destination, different stuff like that. Is there any overlap with what this council approved recently in the spring supplemental for a short-range transportation plan?
There's always a little bit of overlap, but essentially they're looking at two different things. One of them is using the pieces that we have in the city to either provide transit or look at it as the goal of that project is how do we maintain the level of vehicles in? What do we need to tweak on downtown, or how do we change parking around for permits to assure that we're getting what council wants in its direction? So those are specific items that are related to traffic demand management. The origin and destination is looking at the movement of people and looking, so where they play together and where we use the information in the same group, they're different things. Does that make sense, Tori?
Yeah, it does. You know, I said this at the spring supplementals, I'll say it again. We have so much data, so much information. There was a traffic pattern analysis done within the last couple of years. There's just so much of this out there. And I feel like we should have some collective knowledge and some of our observations that we have that I just, continuing to spend money on these studies that I just don't know give us information that guides our decision making. I continue to question, as I think we all wonder about their effectiveness. I want to talk real quickly about wildfire evacuation and this coming summer. Where are we? Where are we with evacuation for this summer? Let's say something happens. I think there's maybe 2 alternate routes, maybe only one.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Bill Lynn. I'm Operations Assistant Chief with Aspen Police Department. So in about 2018, the Police Department and the Special Events Committee, the Special Events Department reached out, tried to understand the capacity of the city for an evacuation in a mass event. So what we did is we kind of modeled using the 4th of July event and predicted what sort of evacuation that would take and how we could actually accomplish an evacuation if town's actually full, So what we came up with was if town's not full, a realistic evacuation would be one route, effectively, and that is the Castle Creek Bridge and Power Plant Road as the normal commute works. And that would take, if town's minimally packed, a day. If town's completely full, it would take somewhere around more than like the normal span of a day. So call it 15, 16 hours, maybe up to 24, depending on actual occupancy in town, to get literally everybody out of town. But every one of the evacuation projections, all we really have is Highway 82 and McLean Flats. Anybody that talks about using the bike path as an evacuation route isn't realistically looking at the problem because if as all of you know, it's tree lined, it is unmanicured, it's not watered, it is not a safe place to put people into. And even if you could put vehicles, for example, on the bike path.
Rio Grande bike path?
Rio Grande bike path, sure. Sorry, I apologize, that wasn't me clear. The Rio Grande bike path, there are choke points in it once you get past Cemetery Lane that really make it completely unrealistic. And although there are limited parts of it within the city limits where you could drive a vehicle on it, you have to know where to get on it because there are choke points on the bridges on the far eastern end of it. So if you went down to the post office, for example, and tried to jump on it with a car, good luck. You got to really know the size of your car because I drove it with a Saab back when we had them, and the Saabs, a really narrow car, touched on both mirrors. Yeah. So one route. The other one that you see people discussing is perhaps taking the Merle pedestrian bridge as a bypass to get around Main Street and to hop on maybe to Castle Creek Road or something like that. But as was discussed earlier by Jen, it actually is not designed for carrying any kind of weight at all. It is designed as a bike path, and it does have the weight strength to handle a single vehicle at a time. But I wouldn't put my family on it if I were trying to evacuate town. So the plan is, as it exists right now, all lanes go out. If we were to do that in a mass evacuation type event, we would send a cop down the inbound lanes, send a cop down to lead all traffic out. So we would take every lane that comes, every lane outside of the roundabout and fill them with traffic going out because at least it's better to have them on the highway than it is, stuck in the path of a fire. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. I think it's probably the same situation anywhere. If you had a catastrophic wildfire in any community, it would be devastating to some degree. There would be evacuations that are needed, and there's probably a few places that actually have the capacity to evacuate an entire population in a matter of hours, I would assume. In the summertime, we do have 82 going through, so we have the benefit of maybe going over the pass, but we know how problematic that can be as well. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the fact of where we live. We live in the hills, we live in a high mountain desert climate for much of the year, et cetera. So we have inherent problems in our area. Okay, other council members, if you would like any clarifying questions at this time, now's the time to do it.
I have no question going.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, I have a list of
Yeah,
questions.
if you have some questions, that'd be great. Let's get those out on the table.
This is in no particular order, just as I read through things, but the Durango example that was like 6 years long, 4 of those years was to find out what they needed to study. Do we have any idea how long it would take to find out what we needed to study?
Well, I think we have an idea of what we need to study, but it's setting those objectives and working with our other partners to be able to do that. I don't know exactly how long it would take. I'm certainly hopeful that it would take far shorter than 4 years.
Well, yeah, because that example, like when they knew what they studied, it was 2 years and $2 million, and a lot of that, the $2 million was what needed to study, so it doesn't seem like as big a factor. Another question, are we, well, I'll skip that one for a second. It seemed like we would get more funding if the bridge became poor. Were we waiting for the bridge to become a poor rating to get more funding to replace it?
You do not want to wait for a bridge to become poor before you get funding. Now, what it does is it sets off a trigger in CDOT that requires them to get it to a place where it can function. What that looks like is a lot of different things, but none of those are going to be favorable to this community and especially the economy of this community. You can count on outages. You do not want, I would say I would not wait until it gets to a 4 or poor range before you make a decision.
And with that, I'd always been familiar that it was when it was below a 50 was a poor rating. Now it's below a 4.
They changed the system, so think of it
Changed
as
it
like
now.
1, 2, 3, 4, same thing, 70, 60, 80, it's just divide
It's
by
the
10.
same gradation, just on different numbers.
No, but
It's just
is a
different
49.9 a 4?
49.9 is a poor,
Yeah, okay.
and
So
we're
we,
50.3.
yeah, so we're very close to that. And like, with that, I've heard a lot of talk about accelerated bridge construction. Are we eligible? Is that a possibility? Is that something we've looked at?
Well, I think we would need that phase 2 to really dial that in. I've had a lot of conversations about accelerated bridges, and I did design accelerated bridges when I was an engineer. And I would say that in most of the cases, it's a new bridge that you're sliding over an existing highway or there is some other need. Now, what you can do is build the bridge on the side, but the demolition of the existing bridge is what would take the time in the case of Aspen specifically. So yes, it's vitally important that this is done quickly, but what you're referring to a little bit is very complicated, and you really need phase 2 to dial in what that means, how it's done. Does that?
In phase 2, there's a rehabilitation and a replacement full analysis for the existing Castle Creek Bridge that will help answer some of those questions.
Got it. Other questions like I have are, do we know what's happening with the burger cabin, and like won't that cause issues with a preferred alternative?
So, the Burger Cabin has been nominated for the National Register, and the state will hear that later this week. But it's also a local landmark, and so, you know, what it's called is a 106 process, but the evaluation that will happen in the reevaluation related to the historic resource will happen either way. And we won't know the specific impacts to the property until we get to that schematic design level and we can understand more clearly what exactly the bridge looks like and what the design looks like. So there will still be a process either way, regardless of if it's on the National Register.
Okay, sounds like another hurdle, obviously. And then the costs I heard were phase 1, phase 2 was, phase 1 was 1.2 million, and phase 2 was an additional 1.5 million? Yeah, so quite a cost there. And then in the packet it said it was 500,000 over budget for the 3 RFPs we have now. Was that referring to phase 1 and phase 2, or just phase 1, or?
It's for phase 1 and phase 2, and there's some additional work that the consultant was recommending that we pursue to answer some additional questions and provide feedback for the community. And so that 1.5 and 1.2 represents the higher value there, and there might be some opportunity to decrease that number if we choose.
Okay, so yeah, over $3 million potentially in doing phase 1, phase 2.
2.7.
Well, plus an additional 500,000 over, or I misunderstood?
The budget was for 2 million.
Oh, so it was already priced as over budget.
2023.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that one. Yeah, I have more, but I'll wait for other comments now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. Board?
Yeah, I don't know where to begin. I think it's easy to get into the weeds on individual facts and pieces of information, but I find it that so much of the information that's in phase 1, it seems like we have that information, and $1.2 million to get information that, I mean, we know the traffic is coming from down valley. We know it's going over the bridge. So I'm not sure how an origin and destination study is needed, because the traffic is here. What do we, and we're just talking about, was it area 2 or the from the roundabout on to Main and 7th? That's the area that we're talking about. So we know the traffic loads are coming in. We know what the traffic levels have been historically. So we need a schematic before we can get funding. We need to have an alignment before we can get schematic. We need to have community acceptance, which I have no idea. I think you're probably going to wind up with a near split, and so the community is going to have to decide that they are going to accept instead of sue if they don't get the alternative that they want. I think that the studies that have been done over the years that led us to the preferred alternative are pretty convincing to me. There were a number of failure points on the split shot. So I just, the timeline is such that if we have to open a whole new EIS and record a decision, we're going to be at 10 years before we can even decide what the schematic should be. So the timeline on it, and we get arguments from the community that time and money are the two most important aspects, that we should do whatever can be done quickest and for the least amount of money. But what I've seen from in the packet is that if you do the current alignment, it's gonna cost more money. That's CDOT is saying to do an in-place replacement would cost more money. I'm not sure that time and money are the number one and two determining factors here. I think acceptance to the community is really important, and that brings us to the question of conflicting reports that we need to have a vote and we don't need to have a vote. CDOT says that if we build the rod in the preferred alternative, we don't need to have a vote. Community members seem to feel, and perhaps the attorney feels, that a vote is necessary. So are we going to get buy-in from the community that if the S-curves is chosen, that the rest of the community is going to accept it? Or if the preferred alternative is accepted, are we, it's sue me, sue you. Billy had it right. Old William Shakespeare. The process could be tied up for longer than the useful life of the bridge. So I don't know where to start here. I think that our goal should be to get to schematic as soon as possible so we can get funding. I don't know how long this federal money is going to be around, but we're definitely going to need funding from CDOT and from the Federal Highway Administration as well. So is it the idea that phase 1 and 2 are going to be running concurrently? Or is phase 2 going to wait until phase 1 is complete, and what kind of timelines are we looking?
Phase 1 will mostly be completed before phase 2 starts. The information in phase 1 can be delivered towards the end of 2023, with phase 1 starting in 2024.
Phase 2 starting in 2024?
Sorry, phase 2 starting in 2024. The consultants mostly, I think, mapped out these phases as to be awarded separately. So if there was a motion by council to award the phases together, there might be some opportunities to expedite items in phase 2.
So the current timeline or time phrase, as I framing as I understand it, would be phase 1 and 2 would be complete, and then we come back and try to decide on an alignment. Alignment requires a vote from the community, and then it gets tied up, and 51% want one thing and 48 want something else. And I mean, I'm dealing from a high level because I don't want to get into the weeds on all of the individual factors that affect it, because some of those are going to be figured out, will have to be figured out after we know what the alignment and what the schematic design is. So it's, you push it back another, and it always seems like RFPs, the scope expands, the cost expands, and the time slows down. So to get all of these things lined up in 10 years and have it built within a 10-year time frame we can't lollygag around, and we have to get. I question if it's something that is a participatory democracy. Is it a question that a simple vote of the electorate is going to decide, because there are so many issues that have been brought up in studies and in the record of decision that, you know, maybe we don't need a camel when we're trying to get a horse. So I'm in a quandary here. It seems like we need to move forward as quickly as possible. In 10 years to get a bridge built is going to require a commitment from the community. And I think our attorney has told us that a vote is going to be required.
Thanks, Ward.
Do you want me to clarify this for a second?
Yeah, you can do it in a second. Good for you.
It will be short, because that is my opinion, but I do want to emphasize that I saw the opinion that, or the statement made by the Department of Transportation back in March of this year, and that they indicated was done collaboratively with the Federal Highway Administration. I just want to let council know and the public to know that I have not discussed this with the Department of Transportation or the Attorney General's office, who advises the Department of Transportation. And at some point, I think it would be important to have those conversations. We have not done that at this point, but that is still my opinion. I have not changed it based on their statement. I would, however, at some point like to discuss it with them. I'm not sure when we'll have that opportunity.
And just to emphasize what CDOT says is if the bridge gets below that level, they're going to build a preferred alternative. It's a state project, and they've said that if the community can't come up with something better, they're going to build what they've already decided is the preferred alternative.
You know, I don't know about that.
Well, that gets to the issues that I would like to discuss with them, because the argument that Ward, or the suggestion that Ward's making, is that they would assert some preemptive authority to go forward with the preferred alternative. And we may disagree with that, and how the city wishes to react to that effort on their part is left to be seen. But we're a long way from having those discussions or those decisions at this point. We need to have the discussions and find out what their position is and why it's contrary to an opinion that I've expressed over the years. So there's a lot of work to be done on that issue from my standpoint.
Good. Yep, we'll go to John, questions or comments, and then I'll go to Bill for his comments, and then we'll bring this around to some direction.
No questions at this point. I'm sure I'll have a lot more later. I just wanted to add to Ward's comments about the bridge itself and its rating, and the fact that the bridge is already under duress just with the current amount of construction and normal everyday traffic, but we've got some major construction projects on the horizon, including the Lift 1 corridor, which is estimated to have nearly 11,000 dump trucks of fill coming out of the excavation that will be required. And once that's done, concrete trucks and steel I-beams will be hauled across that bridge. I'm concerned that that's going to deteriorate our bridge even faster than it's already deteriorating. So this is something I think we should all be aware of, that the bridge is probably not going to last as long as we think it will. Thanks.
You're right, we should let them know to hold off on that construction.
Great
Good point,
idea.
John. Bill?
I like that. Thanks, Tori.
Thanks, Tori.
Firstly, thanks to the staff for their efforts on this. I know it's a lot of work, and you've been asked to react to a lot of different direction over the last couple of years on this. I am not at all in support of the preferred alternative. I am not at all in support of proceeding with any phases of this RFP as it relates to the preferred alternative. That does not mean I don't think that we need a new bridge, and I don't think that we should take action on that right away. I understand the imminency of this. I understand that we need to do something, but I don't think that the preferred alternative is the right solution for our community. If it were up to me solely, I would direct you to work on a comprehensive traffic improvement plan from the airport to the core using the existing alignment. And to me, that would include several major items and a lot of other items that I won't mention and I can't envision all of them on, but it would include a new 3-lane bridge in the current alignment. It would include softened S-curves. It would include some underpasses in certain heavily trafficked areas like Cemetery Lane. It would include a new power plant road bridge that likely goes over the top of the power plant. It would include a new bridge where the pedestrian bridge is that could support real vehicular traffic during the construction and replacement of the existing bridge, and then revert to pedestrian-only use or emergency evacuation use only thereafter. That's the direction that I would give. I don't think that we need to reinvent the entrance to Aspen. I think we need to improve upon it. I think that I am okay with some level of traffic coming into and out of Aspen in perpetuity. I don't think there's a permanent solution here to the traffic, but I do think there's improvement to traffic and evacuation without destroying the character of our town. I think that there are a lot of issues relating to the preferred alternative that aren't being factored into these discussions. They include destructions of neighborhoods. They include eminent domain lawsuits. They include takings lawsuits. These things will delay progress on that plan significantly, and there's a lot of community opposition to it that may result in a failed vote after all this work. So, long story short, I'm not supportive of any further work on the preferred alternative. I'd like to regroup and focus on something simpler using the existing alignment. I don't think we need to revisit the 40-something options that were studied years ago. I think we should focus on improving traffic and throughput and focus on getting a replacement bridge going. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. All right. We're gonna have to have a little bit more conversation at council table. I too am not able to support this moving forward, this funding request moving forward this evening. I have questions around what is involved in phase one. I don't see the end result of pursuing preferred alternative layout in phase one as helpful to the process. You know, I've tried so hard through this whole process to leave my personal desires, feelings, or observations out of it and conduct a process that really allows our community to have some choice. We have a major question that needs to be answered, and that is whether there is a required vote or a no vote for anything moving forward. We need to know that. I, like Ward, have questions around some of the items that are included in phase one, but more than anything, I just can't keep going down this road of spending money on the preferred alternative when I don't really think that that's community consensus for what we want to do moving forward. I think that I agree with Bill. I think that there's some near-term stuff that we should be looking at, and we keep walking back from those. We say, oh, well, we have to talk to CDOT about that, or we have to change this, or we have to change that. Let's change it. We can make improvements to our current roadway. We should be doing that, or at least pursuing it. You know, I could go down a list here of the things that I just have trouble stomaching and making part of final decision making here. For example, the Castle Creek Bridge, currently rated at a 5 for the deck and 6 for the superstructure and understructures. That doesn't sound like it's failing on us tomorrow. It doesn't. If that's 10, 15 years, you know, that's the planning that we're doing now is to make sure that we don't get sub 4 or down to 4 on all these categories. But I don't think that happens in 10 years. Wildfire evacuation, that's something we should be dealing with now. wildfire evacuation, to me, is not like the number one reason that we need to build a new bridge. That's something we should be talking about now and really coming up with the best that we can do, because even if we do move forward with something, it's 10 years down the road. The preferred alternative, you know, we keep confusing some of our language. We go back and forth about what improvements it's going to really make. The studies have shown us that transit improvements are not really there that much. We hear tonight that, oh, it's going to help out the West End sneak, but there's other solutions there. That again is not the reason for me to support the preferred alternative. Other than that, to take it even further, the traffic light at 7th and Main, I think change is a character changer for our community. You know, I think there are alternatives that we can get our community around, but I don't think it's the preferred alternative as it's been kind of displayed to us. And I think, I don't think that putting money behind phase one here is going to get us any better answers. It's just going to solidify more of what I don't think is the best move for this community. So I'm happy to have more conversation around how we move some stuff forward and how we get more clarity around the questions we have and a path forward. But at this time, I don't see it outlined under these tasks in phase one. I also am very hesitant about somebody saying that, well, we really want phase two, but we got to do phase one, obviously, to get to phase two. But phase two is really what we want. I just don't want, I can't support that kind of money. I think that this money could be spent improving our transit and traffic conditions now and help us work towards a community solution that the community can be behind when it comes time to actually start digging in the dirt. Yeah, I could go on a little bit more about this. I mean, I've got 30 years history myself of dealing with this as an issue. I'm really proud of the last council that brought this forward again to be discussing. Really proud of the community members that have been on this journey with us for the last year. And now I'm proud of this council for picking it up and continuing forward in one manner or another. But as for me, I will not be in a place to support this funding request. I am interested in talking more about how we move forward, how we start doing some planning and getting the rest of our questions answered first. And I think that's where we need to be. So with that being said, you have got two folks up here that have said that this request isn't hitting it for them. There's others of you that we need to hear what you're, you know, if you three are in a position to say that you are going to support phase one, please let that be known now, and we can start then maybe working on how to make phase one the best that it can be, or at least start talking about some of the scope that we can influence as it moves forward to get us what we need. So I'll start with Sam.
Yeah. Well, I can say you can add a third. I echo a lot of your, Tori, and Bill's comments. And I mean, where I'd like to see this go is to see how we can replace the current bridge in the most graceful manner possible. You know, we talk about like a vote. Everyone agreed to the current configuration because when everyone moved here, that's what it was. And it's like pulling the rug out from underneath you to change it in that way. So we did agree to this already. How can we replace it in the most graceful way possible? And if we know that, I mean, that's going to prevent like a lot of the lawsuits because I don't know who could argue against it because we did already agree to it.
Thanks, Sam. So voicing not support for the funding request for phase one and phase two at this time.
Yep.
And if you had more information that would come back to you, you would like to know more information about the current alignment and the current bridge replacement.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this money could potentially go towards the environmental impact study if that is needed for the current configuration.
Okay.
So that's the direction I'd like to see this council take if it were up to me.
Okay, thank you. Ward, John?
Ward?
Yeah, I think alignment is the first question to be answered. And before we can answer that, we have to have, we have to know if a vote's required. I don't agree with Sam that we've already agreed on the current alignment because it was there when we moved here. I mean, that doesn't carry weight with me. But I think what's most important is what the alignment is before we spend a lot of money to figuring out these other issues. Before we can get to an alignment, a question of vote. Is a vote needed? And if we vote, or is the community going to abide by that vote? So we need, we need a commitment from the community to move forward. But I don't know how we get that, and I think we need an alignment. I think we probably need, first of all, to figure out if we need a vote. Okay. And then work on alignment, and then spending money towards that community acceptance of a vote.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question that I think would help me and maybe members of the community? So it's my understanding, if we want to replace the current bridge where it is now, a temporary bridge will have to be built somewhere else. Is that a...
We have had side conversations about what that would look like, but nothing formal about what that would look like. You cannot do an accelerated bridge in this case. And so I think the concern is more on the economic side of what that means for that bridge out. And when I'm trying to give you some worst case factors of like just repairing, I'll give you one example. If one of the superstructure below, one of the connections below the bridge starts to fail, what that means is the truck that goes on to that bridge has to build the structure that's temporary below it. All traffic on the bridge is cut off for the structure. They got to build the temporary just to get it back, and then they have to replace that connection. We don't know when that happens. We don't know the downtime, and they won't care about the downtime. I don't know what the impacts on Aspen are at that time. And those are the side conversations we have about Power Plant Road. Like, is it viable to build something that Bill had alluded to, of building a bridge over Power Plant and using the West End as the entry into Aspen? So you're asking a very complicated question that, yes, we do talk about, but publicly, you know, we try to have all our facts in a row before you really answer that question.
It's complicated.
One thing I might add is that the existing alignment was considered in the process, and it was screened out. It was eliminated the comparative screening level based on community acceptability and safety issues. As compared to other alignments, the safety of State Highway 82 is not significantly improved because of the S-curves, and the existing alignment would not address the need for alternative emergency access route in and out of Aspen. And I'm really taking that from the analysis that HNTB did. One thing that we could do is talk to CDOT about what the process would be to replace the bridge in place. You know, I think this is ultimately their facility. And so it's something that we would need to broach with them. You know, my guess is that they've provided us an answer that would require there to be, you know, if it's a federalized project, if it's a state project, then it requires it to go through this NEPA process. So, you know, I think we're happy to have that conversation with CDOT and bring that answer back.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
So right now, we have a couple of outstanding questions. Whether or not a vote is required for the, I guess the vote is really the change to rubber tire solution, basically, and not a light rail as the language read at
the language
one
that was adopted by the city that allowed the conveyance of the right-of-way was 2 lanes of traffic, 1 in, 1 out, in the light rail corridor. The preferred alternative allows for the use of bus lanes pending either financing of the light rail or further change of the proposal, both which would probably require an additional vote. That's been my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we'll get clarity on that when you get an opportunity. I appreciate that. We are looking for more information about what current bridge replacement actually does look like. I think that's very important. Pete, just going off of what you said is that, boy, it could be in 5 years. So we should probably we should get some more information about that, because that one way or another, that bridge has to be maintained to a certain level. We know that much. So we want that information, and then this conversation about the alignment that Ward is alluding to. And Jim just brought something up that, I refer to the record of decision whenever I can't sleep. And Diana and I have had conversations about this, because it's spelled out in the record of decision that the approval is for a 2-lane parkway with a light rail apron, if you will, coming across some rural open space. But because of the language that allows for the interim, and the language is weird, but it says financially unavailable, that kind of thing, that the lanes can be utilized for bus transit and the like. But that's weird, because then it goes from being a 2-lane parkway to 4 lanes of 2 buses and 2 general. I think that there would be more support for even consideration of that by some members of our community if it wasn't 4 lanes across the Merald. And so I do think that there is an alignment question that needs to be answered. I also will say, we're talking about, this goes back to 96 in the modern iteration. The conversation's been going on for probably since they built the bridge that we have now. But, in the language and the way that we get the information from it, it feels like it fosters distrust of the process that happened before. Because I don't think anybody or many people in this room were participants in some of this. And, knowing where we are today, it reminds me of when I was aware of the process and looking at it, was that we kept asking for things, and we kept getting different things during this process. And items that were screened out or discounted for different reasons, the open space votes that needed to happen, there's just so much back and forth that it just, I don't think our modern questions are answered by a document that is 25, almost 30 years old. I really don't. Anyway, that's too much talking from me. What we want to do is we want to go away from this meeting and get a few of our questions answered. I think that these council members need to have their own questions answered when it comes to proceeding with some sort of phase of something. What's next? We want to look at near-term and localized solutions that we can be working on. We want to get more information about the bridge and what it really takes. We want to get more information about what our community might be more willing to support instead of being 50-50 on this issue. We want to know more about the environmental impacts and what the EIS actually does take to get back into. So I think we have more questions around this before we can move into some direction that says, yes, we need to spend money on these items. So I would like to have council members do some more investigating of some of the information for their own positions, and then we need to come back to this table and talk about what we can move forward with after we get our questions answered.
Tori. What I had hoped to get answered and didn't get answered here, but in this work session, is if the existing alignment were to be chosen, how does that happen? What is the phasing on that? I understand that accelerated bridge construction was normally a bridge is built next to it and it slides in, but all of the piers have to be redone. I want to know exactly what that phasing would look like, to be able to try to come up with an alignment answer.
I mean, honestly, to give you the details about that, that's part of this whole project, right? Is to give you those kind of details on the bridge, and what you're asking for is more specific, like getting some structural engineers to be able to decide exactly the phasing and how that's done. That would be in phase 2. I could give you my estimates right now of what I think, but we really need the information that's locked down in one of these studies and how you break it up to answer that fully.
Yeah, Terry, for me, the most important thing is the alignment, to decide on the alignment.
If I may, one thing that you could do is award just the evaluation of the existing bridge.
That's what I was gonna say, is there's a possibility to pull things out of phase 1, and RFP for, I didn't hear much support for a couple of these. Existing conditions analysis, is that what you were alluding to, maybe, Jen?
An existing condition, rehabilitation and replacement analysis was included in phase 2. I think to answer Ward's question though.
Can you go to the phase 2 slide?
One of the things that needs to be considered as we have this discussion is that ultimately, if there are major alternatives that want to be pursued, such as the existing alignment, 3 lanes, a bridge in another configuration, that's ultimately a full new NEPA process that we tried to outline in the presentation. And so what that looks like is that it's basically bringing snowmass to the table, it's bringing RAF to the table, CDOT, Federal Highway Administration, potentially basalt. And so all of these organizations will come together, create alternatives, we'll have objectives. They won't be the same as before. You probably will not have community acceptability as one of the objectives. There won't be.
What do you mean, why?
Potential, because the way that was written was very unique. And so the likelihood that will be redone is, we've heard to be.
He's talking about the specific line in the record of decision that states that this is a City of Aspen approval. It's like we've said in the past, it's very rare that that's written into a document of this level. And if you reevaluate, or if you redo the NEPA process, what we're estimating is that's probably not going to be included in this again. Could be regional.
Given that we'd be paying for this record of decision, can't we make the rules on that?
No, it has to follow a federal guideline.
It's a federal document.
So we'd need more information about that before we jumped into it. Okay.
Tori, if I may, it sounds like a majority of council, in addition to wanting Jim to talk to the AG about the vote, is to explore that bridge replacement. And I think, Jen, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to explain what that would look like, bringing forward just that piece of the RFP, because honestly, we don't have staff capacity at this point to do the level of analysis, and it sounds like a majority of council is interested in that.
And I mean, it's certainly, I spoke with authority saying we can do that. We can go and talk to the consultants who we've interviewed and ask. And if that isn't something that these consultants who have been on this project are willing to do, we can certainly open a new RFP that is specific to the existing alignment. I also think my recommendation would be that we have a conversation with CEDA about what that looks like. Jack outlined the EIS, or the process that we would have to go back through, the entire NEPA process. So it considers all of the alternatives and, does all the weighing against the objective and the purpose and the need. So it is not a guarantee that you're going to get the existing alignment in that process. So we could have a conversation with CDOT about, is there another alternative? But we can certainly bring that information back.
There's a fine line here, and the line is that just talking about Castle Creek Bridge and replacing it or making it safe or making it last is one thing. As that relates to choosing the current alignment, they don't have to be, those don't have to be the same thing.
You separate out the two. The bridge is safe. The bridge is safe. We're on the final legs of the bridge, but it's staff's and CDOT's objective to keep that bridge safe. What we've been saying is that the bridge is gonna need a lot of work if we stay with this bridge.
But
Down
haven't we
periods.
also said that eventually, even if we stay with this bridge, eventually this bridge will need to be replaced?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, and I mean, correct me where I go wrong, but Sam is saying, hey, let's just talk about that. He wants to know, what does it take to replace that bridge?
I just want to know if we have options, because the way
Right.
it's being presented to me a lot of the time is the preferred alternative is actually the only option, and it doesn't even feel like that's the will of the community sometimes. And how, if we kept the current alignment, what does it look like? How do we do it gracefully? How do we do it in the best way possible for this community? Is that actually an option, or is it not? That's really what I want to know.
I don't see why it wouldn't be and why it couldn't be, and we'd almost be irresponsible by not prioritizing the replacement of the current bridge now, since it will have to be done anyways. And if we proceed with the preferred alternative under the guidance that we need to vote, we risk spending millions of dollars and a lot of years on something that might be turned down by the community. And then we're 5 years behind the curve at that point, or however many years behind the curve, and we still have a bridge that's approaching the end of its life. So I would suggest the direction that we could provide staff would be focus on replacement of the bridge and upgrading the bridge, and let's talk about what the phasing looks like, what things we might be able to do in the meantime to alleviate some of the replacement pressures and the construction process. And then maybe separately, we also look at some of the traffic flow improvement things along the corridor from the airport to the core. But the bridge, I think what is smartest here is to isolate the existing bridge and focus on what the process of improving and upgrading it should be.
I want to clarify, make sure that I'm not misrepresented. I want to be able to analyze what replacing the bridge in a current alignment is. I think there are compelling cases and arguments made in in our packet here tonight that, and from safety reasons, for flows, for the S-curves, softening those curves to make available for future transit options. I want to be able to accept or eliminate the S-curves. I do not think that we should proceed with the assumption that the S-curves is the only thing we're going to look at. I am perhaps alone in this, but I feel that the preferred alternative is a good option. I think it's probably the best option, but we have a big segment of the population that doesn't agree with that. And I want to know what I want to be able to weigh both of the alternatives. I think we have two alternatives, the preferred alternative and the existing alignment. And I think we have to decide which one is right. And if you read through the packet, the S-curves have been eliminated through various phases of it. But I was elected I think I was elected to serve our community into the future. I don't think that, I don't think it's right to close your mind to all the alternatives. I think that we should represent the entire community, those that are here and those that are not here, for the future of Aspen and what the best alternative is. So I don't want to short circuit this by saying, oh, we're going to go with the S-curves, we don't need a vote. So I want to give full evaluation of what the phasing would look like, what it would look like if we were to replace the S-curves. But for me, I think that the preferred alternative makes the most sense. But I want to be able to eliminate the S-curves rationally, logically, traffic flow-wise. We've had pretty strong letter from the fire department, from the sheriff's office, from the police department, that in the case of that the S-curves don't supply the kind of flow that we need. So I am not in favor of short-circuiting this. I do want to know what the S-curves would be. I am not convinced that the current alignment is the way we should go in not look at the preferred alternative. There was a long process, a lot of information and community input was listened to come up with the preferred alternative. I don't want to abandon that, but I want to be able to defend that and proceed, but I don't want people to think that I'm for the S-curves with the exclusion of fully evaluating how we get there with the preferred or with the existing alignment versus a preferred alternative.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to be clear about my point of view, I'm very similar. I'm not supporting the S-curves as our only solution. But when you refer to the preferred alternative, again, I can support more investigative study into the original, two-lane parkway across Merle. I could look at that more, but the current preferred alternative as it's being proposed to us is just something that I just don't think serves our community. And for me, this is where it goes back to, like I said, the process that this went through. It was a priority for rail. This entrance to Aspen preferred alternative was because we were pursuing valley-wide rail. And valley-wide rail failed when I believe the town of Basalt had some questions about its alignment. My recollection is that the alignment that they were going to support added another $100 million valley-wide to the project, and it died in that vote. So again, we're looking at the preferred alternative, but this was originally done so that we could get some light rail going across. And now that's not a piece of it. And there's conditions in here that say, oh, well, if you can't afford to do light rail, you can just use buses. Anyway, I think that there are more elegant solutions, and that includes some sort of a split shot. But we're not there yet. I don't have support for moving forward with that. So again, I think where we're at right now, John, you have a comment? Yeah, just real quick. I think the preferred alternative is the preferred alternative for a good reason, because, I mean, granted, it's 25 years old, as has been stated before. But there were good reasons to rule out all the other alternatives. Now, am I a huge fan of the preferred alternative? No, I prefer it the way it is. But is our community served well with the way things are? No. Public transportation are compromised, and so are evacuation routes. So I think this needs to be studied more. I don't know what the path forward is, but I think we should be looking at all options. We are not moving forward with a reopening at this time, but that may come next. I think that, once again, I heard a request for information. We want to know about the vote, no vote situation. We want to know about the replacement of the Castle Creek Bridge. And you heard a couple other things that surround that for information requests. I think that we can come back with another proposal to say, hey, this is how we can move forward what we heard.
Do you have what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
That smiley face just looks like it's peering into my soul. All right.
Get rid of that thing.
We thank you guys very much.
Put more.
No meeting tomorrow night for us, so we will be back in 2 weeks.
No, next
Council retreat
Monday's
on Monday.
Oh, no, we do have the retreat on Monday. And no meeting next Tuesday either?
No, we have a meeting on Tuesday.
We do.
Yep.
Thank you. We'll be back next week. Thank you as always to GrassRoots, and thank you to everybody that showed up tonight.
Tort, don't you have council board reports? Or no?
Nope. Yeah, hey, man. Guys, we had council updates and board reports.